welcome to Web of Stories. My name is Melinda, and today I'm going to do another update on my short story, September. It is September. It is Shorty September. I am doing a version of it where I read a short story, 30 short stories in the month of September. My goal was a short story every day. I've already had to play catch up once, but I'll get to that. Sorry, my iPad has decided to make noise. Have you heard that? Berryin. Anyway, I will put a card up here to my last update where I did the first 7 stories. I am now doing the next 6. I was hoping to wait for 7, but I want to get this up on Thursday. So we're just going to do 6. So the first one that I read was, number 8. So this is story number 8. And that came from this book, The Witness for the Prosecution and Other Stories by Agatha Christie. And this was Sing a Song of Sixpence. So this is a story I was not familiar with. It is an older story, older-ish. I mean, Agatha Christie had a 50, almost 60-year career. So early story could be anything within the first 20 years. But this was, now the first story I read in this book was Witness for the Prosecution, which was first published... Wow, that was first published in 1925. So the argument I'm going to make for this one that it wasn't very good because it was an early story does not hold because it was written in 1929. However, 1929 was not a good year for Agatha Christie. If you know anything about her, she had some personal upheavals big time in 1929. And this was published in December of 1929. So my guess is that she was writing it when things were developing. Editing Melinda here. Agatha Christie's really awful year was actually 1926, not 1929. I remember that incorrectly, so basically there's no excuse for this story not being good. Just wanted to put that out there before people got on me about my Agatha Christie dates being wrong. I realized I was wrong. All that weird stuff happened in 1926, not 1929. This is just a bad story. Developing. My point on this is Sing a Song of Sixpence is not a great mystery. So there's that. The mystery is not memorable at all. I also think there's a technical flaw in it that, at the risk of being spoilery, the solution, she doesn't play fair. Let's put that out. So, but the other thing with this book is it's really kind of skeevy in parts. So there's an amateur detective named Sir Edward Palliser, and he's an older gentleman. He's retired, and he is looking for something to keep his mind going. And then one day, his servant comes in and says, "There's a woman at the door." And he's like, "Well, bring her in." And he doesn't recognize her at first, but then she says her name, which is Magdalene Vaughn. And he's like, "Oh, yes, now I remember her." And then this is what it says. It's very skeevy. I'm sorry. "Why, of course," he pressed the outstretched hand warmly. She just introduced herself. He remembered her perfectly now. That trip home from America on the Siluric, whatever, ship name. This charming child, for she had been a little more than a child. He had made love to her. He remembered her in a discreet, elderly man of the world fashion. She had been so adorable, so adorably young, so eager, so full of admiration and hero worship, just made to captivate the heart of a man nearing 60. The remembrance brought additional warmth into the pressure of his hand. So that's gross. That is gross. It's very Lolita-ish. Now, before you fear that we're going into Lolita territory in this one, it is some years past, and now she's a very decrepit, like almost 30, and therefore she's not attractive at all. So, yes. So this story was a little disappointing, I gotta say. But Agatha Christie wrote a lot of stories. They can't all be winners. And let me tell you, you'll see her again in this video with one that's interesting in its own right, but in a more positive way. So the next story I read, I finally started. Hateship, Friendship, Courtship, Loveship, Marriage, which I read the title story, which was a really interesting story. I don't think I've ever read Alice Munro before. Let me hold it up. This is by Alice Munro. This was a story, and my one quip with this is I had a really hard time kind of placing it in time because on some ways it felt like it was like a 19th century story, but then they talked about watching television. So whatever. And it's basically about this maid, servant, whatever, who is arranging to have this man all his furniture sent to him in some town in Western Canada. She is, I believe, in Toronto-ish. She's in a city somewhere east in Canada. And as the story goes on, you find out that the furniture she is sending is the furniture that belonged to her employer's daughter and her husband, and she's sending it to the husband. The daughter has died. The employer doesn't know his furniture is leaving. Also, we find out that the daughter of the woman who died and the person to whom she is sending the furniture is really not a nice girl and is kind of nasty. And she has a friend who's also kind of nasty. And they've been playing tricks the whole time. And also, the guy she's sending it to does not know what's coming. But oddly, despite everything, because the story kind of works out, because it just does. I can't explain it more than that without being spoilery, but I really enjoyed this one. It went where I did not think, like, you really thought you were going on one trajectory and you didn't end up there, and I liked that. So I'm looking forward to reading more into this collection. Then I read Fran's Friend Has Cancer by Jess Walter, Jess Walter, out of The Angel of Rome. The story has nothing to do with cancer. That's probably a good thing because I got some news about someone dear to me. Today I read this story, so that was not good. But anyway, this is basically a story about two older people. They have a grown child. They're clearly retired because they are eating lunch because they're going to go see a weekday matinee of a show. And a lot of it is just dialogue between these two people. They are a couple who, at least the woman had been married before because she has a son from a previous relationship. Although they married quite some time ago because the son was a child when it happened and now he's an adult. And it's just sort of like banter between the two of them. It's like crotchety old guy and his long-suffering wife. And then the guy notices that someone's watching him. And then it goes a little bit weird in a way that I kind of liked. And it ended up being a lot deeper and not at all what you thought it was about. It's not about cancer, so don't worry. It's just Fran's friend has cancer. It was just sort of the start of a conversation. Fran is not even a character in this story, so. Another winner from Jess Walter. Again, Jess Walter, the author I always think I'm not going to like but end up loving. Then I went to Japan, back to Sayaka Murata, and this one was Two's Family. Now, I had said something earlier because I said it looked like she might be bringing the characters from Convenience Store Woman in. I don't think she is. So these characters were in the previous story, which was very short, and I didn't count in it because it was very short. And one of the characters, the same character name as in Convenience Store Woman, it was like she was an older woman and she had worked her life as a part-time convenience store worker. So I'm like, that's weird. Maybe it is. Very clearly is not if you read this. It just, I think she was workshopping characters or something. So put Convenience Store Woman out of your mind. But this is a story about two women, Keiko and Yoshiko, yes. And they are in their 70s. And they had grown up together. And they had made this pact that a lot of people do. If we're not married by the time they're 30, we're just going to move in together. But unlike most people, they actually did this. So when they were about 30, they moved in together. And this is not a romantic relationship. In fact, Keiko is very promiscuous. And that's kind of like a side element of the story. But they moved in together. And then one of the women was artificially inseminated twice. And the other one. So they have 3 daughters that they are raising together. Or they raised together. They're all adults now. And everyone's like, what's going on here? Are you guys lesbians? What's going on here? But the fact is, they're just friends who have formed this family together and they're raising their children together. And in this story, Keiko has got cancer and she's in the hospital because she's going to have a surgery that should cure her cancer. I did not realize I had 2 cancer stories in a row. Anyway, so this story is just about Yoshiko who goes to see Keiko and they're talking and it's just sort of a study on their life. The part about the promiscuous thing is that Keiko keeps a diary. And at one point when she found out when she was diagnosed, she started writing a will, but then she went back to writing like dirty poems about her sex life, but she keeps wanting to read them to Yoshiko. And Yoshiko's like, yeah, no. What I liked about this story is it has a very, vague ending that's up to interpretation on purpose. Now, I hate that when it's clearly not meant to be that way, but this is meant to be that way, and that's okay. And I like that. And it really got me thinking about like relationships and the definition of family. So far, the stories I have read out here, not counting the super short one, are all, actually not counting the first super short one I read, but actually I read another super short one after this, which also kind of falls in this. We're all about like defining things in our world, defining family, defining culture. So I think that's a really interesting, we'll see if that holds through for the rest of the book. But that was Choose Family by Sayaka Murata. Also, significantly less weird than the other stories. So that's always good. Okay, now from successful stories to maybe a not so successful story, although that may be on me. I read out of The Yellow Wallpaper and Other Stories by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. I read A Day's Berryin, which is about these two sisters who go berrying, and I kind of feel like I missed something in this story. Like I really did. Like it ended in a way like I should have gotten something and I didn't get it. I have to read the story. I mean, I read the story, I read it, and then I did a kind of somewhere between a scan and a read again, and I still didn't get it. So I guess I'm dumb. I don't know. I didn't get the story. But that's A Day's Berryin by, I actually look this up. I looked this up on the internet and I couldn't find an explanation. Like I was looking for Cliff Notes or an explanation. I couldn't find one. So I don't know. Maybe I'm not the only dumb one. I don't know. But this was not a story that worked for me because it wasn't an effective story or I'm an idiot. One of the two. I didn't get it. And then finally, I went back to, and that was just this morning, I went back to our friend Agatha Christie. I told you we'd see her again. And I read a bat schniz crazy story. A story that was written in 1925. So this really is an early story. And it's earlier this year, I read a book called Come Tell Me How You Live, which is a memoir that Agatha Christie wrote. And I was completely delighted by it because it was so unlike anything I expected from her. And this story, Mr. Eastwood's Adventure, is the same way because it's ridiculously funny. It's ridiculous, but it's like meant to be ridiculous. So it starts out, we meet Mr. Eastwood, and Mr. Eastwood is a crime writer. Now, whenever Agatha Christie, I'm sorry, my computer's making beeps. Discord is busy. Whenever Agatha Christie writes about a crime writer, I always think she's writing about herself, which makes this even funnier. But he's got writer's block and he's trying to write a story. And the title of the story is, what is it? Let me get it right here. The Mystery of the Second Cucumber. Now, why would you not want to read that mystery? But he can't get it to work. It's just not working. So all of a sudden he gets this call from this woman. You must come see me. You must come see me. And he's like, who are you? Oh, you must come. So he has nothing better to do because writing's not going well. So he comes to see her and he ends up at this antique shop. And he doesn't really know what to do with it. So he kind of ends up buying things from this old lady in the antique shop. And then he's like, well, I guess I won't ever see this woman again. So I'm not going to embarrass myself. So he just goes, he's paying for his purchase. And he just goes, cucumber, because the woman on the call told him the password was cucumber. I left that important part out. I'm sorry. Cucumber. And the woman goes, oh, why didn't you just say that before? Go up the stairs. So he goes up the stairs and this beautiful woman falls into his arms. And she's like, oh, you're here. And they start kissing each other because that's what you do with people you've never seen before is you start making out. And then 2 police officers come and they're arresting him, but they arrest him under the wrong name. And he's like, no, that's not me. And he's like, yes, it is. So he's like, okay, I can prove that it's not me, but first let me kiss this woman goodbye. So he kisses her goodbye. He says, I'm not who you think you are, but I'm going to kiss you anyway, because that's not weird. And so they go to his house, and I'm totally in spoiler area now. I am. Actually, I'm going to stop because it's spoiler area. It's a very weird, delightful story. There's no deep meaning to the story. It's just Agatha Christie, a young Agatha Christie who is untouched by personal turmoil, because this is 1925, not 1929. She's untouched by personal turmoil of really serious adult kind, having fun with the writing life. So there's nothing deep in this story, but it was a joy to read. I will say that. Sometimes stories are just joy. And I like them when they come from authors like Agatha Christie, where you're expecting one thing and you get something else. So I was 1 for 2 with Agatha Christie this week, but and I was 0 for 1 with Charlotte Perkins Gilman. But other than that, a good 6 stories. I'm going to try and do another update next Thursday. So that should be 7 stories if I don't fall. I fell behind on Sunday this week because I had a crazy day and I just didn't get a chance to read anything. But, I made it up, just read 2 the next day. So luckily, the 2 I read were short. So It was easy. But anyway, that is my short story. I am today that I'm filming is the 13th, and I have read 13 short stories so far, so I am doing well. This is actually a pretty easy challenge for me to do. I have nothing against Shorty September. I think Shorty September is great. I didn't want to do 30 books in 30 days because that I think would have been too much for me because there's other stuff I need to and want to read. But short stories, just focusing on different short stories for the month has been working for me, so I like that. I am hoping to add in a couple more authors for my next update. I put a hold on two short story collections, one from Chekhov and one from Roald Dahl, that would be really nice if they came into the library by this afternoon so I could pick them up. They will. I mean, they will come in this afternoon. Whether or not they come before or after I go to the library is a big question. So if they come in before I go to the library, sorry, Discord is busy. If they come in before I go to the library, you should see some Dahl and Chekhov next week. If not, you'll see them next week. Works out that way. There's still lots of September left. Anyway, if you made it through this rambling video, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next time. Thank you.